It's been a long time coming, and it's finally here! High Guardian Spice sucks. And anyone on the internet can tell you about it. That's not why I'm really here, and if you want my opinion on the show in its entirety, just jump to here if you don't care about the awful justifications and practices of the High Guardian Spice team, as well as Crunchyroll that led to a terrible Western production. Now, to start things out, I want to talk about the production of High Guardian Spice, in which it took an unknown amount of money from the Crunchyroll subscriptions to put into its budget. I'm sure everybody who knows what Crunchyroll is knows that customers pay for a subscription to watch anime created by Japanese studios in high quality without ad breaks. Usually. Now, you can just hop onto the website without being a subscriber and still have a selection to choose from, but the quality's pretty bad and the ad breaks are very frequent. It can get pretty tedious to watch, but as long as my money's going in to support the studios that made these amazing works of animation, I'm glad to put up with... Oh. This isn't something new to anime studios or streaming services. In fact, plenty of companies like Gonzo and Toei, just to name a few, poorly mistreat, underpay, and overwork their animation staff. Streaming companies that wish to buy the streaming rights to an anime will wildly bid thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode against each other to exclusively hold the license to stream it on their website. While all of this money goes into animation studios, it does nothing as to helping actually supporting animators at all. It's a pseudo trickle-down effect that normally ends up with workers making as little as 60% of national average for people ages 20 to 24. That's like 1,550,000 yen. Oh, that's not so bad. Hold on, what's that in American dollars? $14,600 a year. So what does all this have to do with High Guardian Spice? Well, let me put it into simple terms for your little monkey brain. Let's say you buy a bunch of lemons from someone to make lemonade that people love. The money you make from selling lemonade goes to supporting yourself, restocking cups, and repairing tools, with some of that money going back into buying lemons. Now, let's say you have an idea to use blueberries you've been growing to make lemonade you want to sell to your customers. Upkeeping those blueberry bushes takes money too, so the money that would normally go into the lemon farmer would instead go into growing blueberries instead. That farmer gets less money, and the people who came for lemonade notice that you've been trying to sell them blueberry juice while painting it as just like lemonade. Your customers don't like it, you do it anyways after all the negative feedback, and now the lemon farmer has gotten less income because the money used to support him is going back to you! Now that's again a very simple explanation, and the anime industry is riddled with horrible practices no matter where your Crunchyroll sub money is going to. But with this show, it's made it much more obvious as to what these companies have been doing for years. In all honesty, if you want to really support your favorite anime studios, I would suggest donating to crowdfunding events or the Patreon of studios themselves. You can donate to non-profit organizations that look to help improve the living conditions of workers in the anime industry, one of which is the Japanese Animation Creators Association, otherwise known as JACA. You can also look into commissioning work from the creators themselves, or looking into direct donations to the studio itself on their independent websites. I'll leave a few links down below if you really want to do that. But don't sub to streaming services! Pirate anime and support them directly! Thank you. Anyways, moving on to more issues with the show, let's talk about diversity and respect in the show and the staff of High Guardian Spice. Now, some of you may or may not remember this video popping back up in 2018. Let's be reasonable here and compliment the idea that they're looking into creating a diverse workforce on the show. It's a nice thing to strive for and bring onto the table when it comes to hiring equally qualified staff. Why is that so hard to say? But as you look into the magnifying glass, you may start to see cracks in this idea that the video itself has tried to portray. When searching the names for everyone that worked on the show, the only diversity I saw was the color of everyone's hair. The entire staff outside the creator themselves were white. Far from the quote of very ethical and LGBTQ+ diverse Crunchyroll Studios called the team. That's not very diverse, that's a shallow call from down the hole where they dug themselves. Let's not even get started on the blatant misandry of Kate Leth, one of the writers of the show. Now, I'm all for representation in all forms of media. In fact, I feel like creating a diverse world full of all kinds of ethnicities, races, and sexualities. Yes, ethnicities and races are different because fantasy worlds consist of both. When it comes to High Guardian Spice, however, it feels like most characters are defined simply by their sexual identities. You see, a good example is this one character, Snapdragon. He's a scrawny ginger kid whose whole character is that they want to be a woman. They have literally no other defining character trait outside of maybe being one of the 3 quote-unquote bad guys. Even though what they do is extremely trivial to the series as a whole. Professor Caraway teaches magic and is trans. That's basically it. Anise and Aloe are gay and possibly into polyamory, with the only really defining part they play is just affirming Sage's actions and issues. Then you have Rosemary and Sage, 2 of the 4 main characters who are more or less some of the better written characters that the writers sought to bring out in that LGBTQ+ representation. They're heavily hinted at being bisexual, but at least it's not the core focus of their characters. Time and Parsley are there too, but they're actually decently written in the show, so they get a semi-pass. When it comes to writing characters with sexual preferences, or are used to present different ethnicities, it's really important that characters are not defined by those traits alone. If you want a character to be compelling or interesting, they need to be a character in the world first, and then be on the list of other traits second. Why do they exist? What is their drive? What importance do they bring to the story or overall lore of the world? If you answer any of these questions as just a way to add representation to the story you're making, you've already failed at writing a character because you've tokenized them. If I were to ask you which of these 2 characters is better written, Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time, or Shiro from Voltron the Netflix animated series, which would you pick? If you chose Princess Bubblegum, myself and all of my friends agree with you. Mostly because Princess Bubblegum is a complete character when it comes to the world of Adventure Time and the land of Ooo. She's a leader, a princess, a scientist, a friend of Finn, as well as bisexual. None of these traits overwhelm the others, and it all blends well together to create a complete and cohesive character that's extremely enjoyable to watch. Shiro, on the other hand, is also a leader of the Voltron team, is adept, calm, and then completely derails into whatever the plot needs him to be, and to one point, just to be gay. He wasn't an actual character, he was a plot device with dialogue options. How does this relate to High Guardian Spice characters that I listed earlier? Well, it all comes back to tokenization. Snapdragon, Anise, Aloe, and Caraway, they're all just tokens used by the writing team to claim the show has plenty of representation. But outside of that, they have little to no other character traits that make them interesting or fleshed out as characters. The creator just doesn't care to dive into their characters as much more outside of their sexualities. That's not how you represent people. That's not how any human being functions. You're just pandering. Now that that's out of the way, what about the show itself? Well, you see this warning? This is the warning you see at the beginning of every High Guardian Spice episode. After reading this, you would think the show itself isn't made for kids, but almost everything about the show gives off a cute, moe magical girl vibe. From the intro song, to the theme of a bunch of girls going to a magical school, the art design, the dialogue, it all screams made for kids or young teens. So why the warning? I tried to do some digging and I couldn't find any legal standing that the company would have to follow, or any broadcast standards that fit the scenario. So I tried asking the creator, Ray Rodriguez themselves, about who the target demographic is for the show, and I never got a reply. The tone of the show is all over the place. In the first 2 episodes, it seems really kid-friendly, but then episode 3 and onward, the tone just takes a nosedive. Blood spews out of creatures like gushers, death and decay is shown in pretty strange detail, and the kids curse randomly out of the blue. It's not like teen and young adult shows can't have this kind of thing, but with the disclaimer you'd think it's targeted towards adults. But with all the hand-holding when it comes to talking about sexuality and childlike dialogue, it's not that either. The only conclusion I could come up with is that the show itself isn't made for you, the viewer. It's not made for kids, it's not made for adults. young adults or teens. It's made for the writers. It's made for affirmation and patting themselves on the back for all the good work that they did in saying they made the show that promotes diversity and talks about gender identity. The animation is cheap, the backgrounds are uninspiring and empty. Everyone who's reviewed the show already can tell you this. So I don't want to repeat what's been repeated over and over again. The show's a flop that looks to pander to such a small and niche audience that your opinion doesn't really matter to them. I understand Ray wanted to make a show that he's been yearning to make for a long time, and it's nice to see that not only has his dream become a reality, but he also has another show already in production. Here's hoping that he's learned a thing or two about creating a show and directing writers to make something good next time. My fingers are crossed for High Guardian Spice not getting a second season.